Hi everyone. Welcome back to Etymology Explorer. Here is your daily dose of etymology of the term Zionism. The term Zionism is derived from the Hebrew word, Zion, which originally referred to a specific hill in Jerusalem and later expanded semantically to represent the city of Jerusalem, the land of Israel, and the Jewish people's spiritual and national aspirations. The word itself is rooted in Semitic languages, with some scholars tracing it to a Canaanite or pre-Hebrew origin, possibly meaning fortress or dry place. Over time, Zion evolved into a powerful symbol of Jewish identity and hope. The journey of the term Zion traces its linguistic and cultural evolution across languages, from its ancient Hebrew roots to its modern usage in European and English contexts, culminating in the ideological term Zionism. Here's an overview. Hebrew origins. The word, Zion, originates in Biblical Hebrew, first appearing in the Bible, for example, 2 Samuel 5 verse 7, as the name of a specific hill in Jerusalem. Over time, its meaning expanded to encompass Jerusalem as a whole, the land of Israel, and the spiritual concept of Jewish homeland and salvation. Its Hebrew root is debated, but as mentioned before, it may derive from a Semitic root meaning fortress or dry place. Hellenistic Greek. When Hebrew scriptures were translated into Greek in the Septuagint, 3rd to 2nd century BCE, Zion was transliterated as Shaun. The Greek language preserved the sound and sacred connotations of the term without significant semantic changes, treating it as a proper noun referring to the holy site or city. Latin. As Christianity spread and the Bible was translated into Latin, for example, the Vulgate, 4th century CE, the Greek Shaun was carried over as Shaun, maintaining the transliteration. Latin further solidified the term's association with Christian theology, often symbolizing the heavenly Jerusalem or the church itself. Medieval Germanic languages. Through the influence of Latin in medieval Europe, Shaun entered Germanic languages, including Middle High German, as a religious term. It retained its connection to Jerusalem and spiritual redemption, often appearing in Christian hymns and theological texts. English. The term Shaun entered Middle English via Old French, which had borrowed it from Latin. By this time, it was used primarily in a Christian theological context. In English, Shaun became interchangeable with Zion, with the latter form aligning more closely with the original Hebrew pronunciation. Both spellings coexisted, but Zion became standard for referencing the Jewish and biblical contexts. Modern German and the coining of Zionism. In the late 19th century, the term Zion was revitalized in the context of Jewish nationalism. The term was first popularized in the late 19th century by Austrian writer, journalist and intellectual Nathan Birnbaum, who used it in an 1890 essay, Selbstemancipation, to describe the emerging nationalist movement advocating for the establishment of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. The movement formally crystallized under the leadership of Theodor Herzl, particularly with the publication of his book Der Judenstaat, The Jewish State, in 1896 and the First Zionist Congress in 1897. Nathan Birnbaum coined the term Zionismus in 1890 to describe the modern political movement advocating for the return of Jews to their ancestral homeland in Palestine. Birnbaum's choice of Zion drew on its historic and spiritual significance, while the suffix ismus, from Greek ismos, indicated an organized ideology, similar to terms like nationalismus, nationalism. English adaptation. Zionism. As the Zionist movement gained traction globally, particularly after the First Zionist Congress in 1897, the German term Zionismus was adopted into English as Zionism. The English form retained the ideological suffix ism, aligning it with other political and social movements of the time. By the early 20th century, Zionism was widely recognized as the term for the movement advocating for the establishment of a Jewish homeland. Summary. Hebrew, Zion, original hill in Jerusalem, later a symbol of Jewish hope. Greek, Shaun, transliterated in the Septuagint. Latin, Shaun, maintained in Christian theological contexts. German, Shaun or Zion, adopted from Latin with similar meanings. The term Zionismus was coined by Nathan Birnbaum, Austrian Jewish thinker and nationalist. English, Zion, used biblically, expanded into Zionism via German Zionismus, creating a political ideology from a historic and spiritual concept. This journey reflects the interplay of linguistic preservation and cultural adaptation, as the term evolved from its ancient Hebrew roots into a modern ideological term with global significance. Thus, Zionism etymologically and ideologically reflects the connection to the ancient Jewish yearning for return to Zion, combined with modern political aspirations. Etymology of the term conservatism. The term conservatism has a rich etymological history, rooted in Latin and shaped by its use in political, social, and philosophical contexts over time. Here's a linguistic breakdown. Origins in Latin. Conservatism derives from the Latin verb conservare, which means to preserve, to keep intact, or to save. Con, a prefix meaning together or thoroughly. Servar, a verb meaning to keep, to guard, or to maintain. Together, conservare conveys the sense of protecting something as it is or preventing change. The past participle conservatus means preserved or maintained, which formed the basis of later adaptations in Romance and other languages. Development in Romance and English. In medieval Latin, conservare was often used in theological and legal contexts, referring to the preservation of moral, spiritual, or legal integrity. The word entered English through Old French as conserva and conservation, which appeared in Middle English around the 14th century. These forms were related to the general act of preserving. Linguistic shift to political ideology. First use as an ideological term. The modern sense of conservatism as a political philosophy is credited to the early 19th century, particularly in France and Britain. The French term conservatism emerged in response to revolutionary ideas, promoting the preservation of traditional institutions, monarchy, and religion. This usage spread to English and was solidified as a counterpoint to radicalism and liberalism. Semantics and connotation. While the core meaning of conserving remained, conservatism linguistically shifted to imply a resistance to rapid change or upheaval, particularly in societal and governmental systems. Linguistic characteristics. Morphology. The term combines Latin roots, con and servar, with the suffix ism, making it part of a broader family of ideological words. Semantic evolution. Originally neutral, referring to preservation in general, it became more value-laden as it associated with specific political and cultural ideologies. Cross-linguistic adaptations. Variants of conservatism exist in many languages, such as conservatismo in Spanish, conservatism in French, often with similar ideological connotations but adapted to local contexts. In summary, conservatism linguistically stems from the idea of preservation and protection inherent in the Latin conservare. Over time, it evolved semantically to signify a political philosophy advocating the maintenance of traditional institutions and values, shaped by historical and cultural developments. Etymology of the term feudalism. The evolution of the term feudalism involves a series of linguistic and conceptual transformations, moving from the specific term feudum to the broader ideological system implied by feudalism. Here's a step-by-step breakdown. Feudum. Origin. The word feudum, or feodum, appears in medieval Latin around the 9th century. It denotes a fief, a parcel of land granted by a lord to a vassal in exchange for service, typically military. Etymology. Likely derived from a Germanic root, fehu or feo, meaning cattle, a traditional measure of wealth. This reflects a transition from movable wealth, cattle, to immovable wealth, land. Context. Feudum was a legal and economic term used in the feudal contract that defined lord-vassal relationships. Feudalis. Transition. By the 12th century, the adjective feudalis emerged in medieval Latin to describe things related to the feudum, such as the laws and customs governing fiefs. For example, feudalis consuetudo referred to feudal customs. Meaning, feudalis began to capture the broader societal and legal framework built around feuda, plural of feudum, encompassing the hierarchical system of landholding and obligations. Feudal. Emergence in vernacular languages. The term feudal entered Romance languages and English during the Renaissance and early modern period. In English, it is first recorded in the 17th century. In this period, the term feudal retained its adjectival function, describing things related to feudalism, such as feudal lords, feudal rights, and feudal obligations. It was primarily descriptive and historical, referring to medieval institutions. Feudalism. Coined in the 18th century. The term feudalism, French, feudalite, Latinized as feudalismus, arose during the Enlightenment to describe the political, social, and economic system of medieval Europe. First uses. French philosophers like Montesquieu and Voltaire used feudalite critically, emphasizing its oppressive and hierarchical nature. The term was Latinized as feudalismus and subsequently entered English as feudalism. It evolved from a description of feudal law and landholding practices to a broader conceptual framework for understanding medieval society as a whole. Conceptual evolution. From specific to general. Feudum, specific fief, land parcel. Feudalis, related to fiefs or feudal law. Feudal, descriptive of the system tied to fiefs and vassalage. Feudalism, an overarching socio-political and economic system. 18th century critique. Enlightenment thinkers viewed feudalism negatively, associating it with tyranny and the stagnation of progress. This ideological framing influenced its use in historical and Marxist contexts. Marxist perspective on the transition. From a Marxist standpoint, this linguistic progression mirrors the historical development of modes of production. Feudalism as a term became instrumental in identifying a pre-capitalist stage characterized by the dominance of land-based wealth, exploitation of peasants through extra-economic coercion, such as tribute and labor dues, a hierarchical, decentralized political structure centered on lords and vassals. In sum, the journey from feudum to feudalism reflects both linguistic adaptation and the growing abstraction of the term to analyze historical and social systems. Etymology of the term socialism. The term socialism originates from the early 19th century and is derived from the Latin word socius, meaning companion, ally, or associate, and the related concept of societas, meaning society or partnership. It was first used in its modern sense in France and Britain during the 1820s and 1830s as a response to the social and economic changes brought about by the Industrial Revolution. The transformation of the Latin root socius into socialism reflects a linguistic and ideological evolution tied to the socio-political context of the 19th century. Here's how the term evolved. From socius to social. The Latin socius evolved into the Old French social and later into the English social, relating to companionship or the organization of society. The adjective social came to describe matters concerning relationships between people, communities, and organized groups. The ideological shift. Early French reformers like Pierre Leroux, c. 1830s, are credited with coining and popularizing socialism. For them, the term represented a response to the perceived individualism of capitalism and sought to emphasize community and cooperation. The term was adopted and refined by thinkers like Robert Owen in Britain, who envisioned utopian communities. Over time, the concept of socialism evolved to signify various political and economic ideologies that critique capitalism and advocate for social ownership or regulation of production and resources to reduce inequality. It became associated with diverse schools of thought, ranging from utopian socialism to Marxist socialism, democratic socialism, and more. By the mid-19th century, socialism had become a distinct political movement, solidified by the works of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, who defined it as a transitional phase toward communism. Thus, socius, companion, evolved into socialism through linguistic development and the application of the word to describe a movement advocating companionship and cooperation in economic and societal structures. The term encapsulated the shift from individualism to collective action in addressing societal challenges. Etymology of the term liberalism. The term liberalism has its roots in the Latin word libere, meaning free. Over time, this foundational idea of freedom has evolved through various linguistic and cultural influences. The following is a linguistic breakdown of its etymology and development. Latin roots. Libere, the Latin word for free, referring to personal liberty and the state of not being enslaved. Libertas, freedom or liberty, derived from libere. This term is central to the Roman and later Western philosophical traditions. Liberalitas, generosity or a spirit of openness, also derived from liber. This adds a connotation of magnanimity and open-mindedness to the root meaning. Medieval and early modern usage. In medieval Latin, liberalis, which is the immediate precursor to the term liberalism, and derives directly from the root liber, free, evolved to refer to qualities associated with freedom, education, and nobility. The term liberal arts, arts liberals, emerged, describing studies suitable for free citizens, such as grammar, rhetoric, and philosophy. Introduction into Romance languages. Old French. The word liberal entered Old French from Latin, retaining its meanings of generosity, nobility, and freedom. Spanish, Italian, and Portuguese. Similarly, liberal was adopted into these languages, often retaining both the political and ethical senses of freedom and openness. Modern English development. The English term liberal entered usage around the 14th century, primarily describing attributes of generosity or open-mindedness. By the 17th and 18th centuries, with the rise of Enlightenment thinking, liberal began to take on political connotations, emphasizing individual freedoms, limited government, and free markets. The formation of liberalism. Suffix ism, derived from Greek ismos, via Latin ismus, indicating a system of beliefs or practices. Liberalism, first recorded in English in the early 19th century, reflecting a coherent political philosophy grounded in liberty, equality, and individual rights. This development occurred in parallel with similar formations in other European languages, liberalism in French, liberalismo in Spanish and Italian. Linguistic evolution. Semantics. The word shifted from a focus on personal qualities, generosity, nobility, to a broader societal application, focusing on freedom of thought, expression, and governance. Cognates. Many European languages share cognates of liberal and liberalism, underscoring the shared linguistic and cultural heritage of these concepts. Summary. Linguistically, liberalism combines liber, freedom, with the suffix ism to describe a belief system emphasizing freedom. Over centuries, its meaning expanded from personal attributes to a political ideology, reflecting shifts in societal values and intellectual thought. This evolution highlights the adaptability of the term across languages and contexts while preserving its core focus on freedom. Etymology of the term communism. The term communism was formed from commune, from the Latin word communis, meaning common or shared, and the suffix ism. This root reflects the core idea of communism, the shared ownership of resources and the absence of private property. Here's a breakdown of its development. Latin origin, communis means common, public, or shared by all. It is the root for related words like community and communal. Medieval and early modern use. Variations of the term were used in the Middle Ages to describe monastic communities or groups emphasizing shared life and property. 18th century. The word communism began to emerge in its modern sense in the late 18th century. French philosophers, such as François-Noël Babeuf, used communism to describe social systems advocating collective ownership of land and wealth. 19th century popularization. In the mid-19th century, communism became associated with the political and economic ideologies of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Their work, The Communist Manifesto, 1848, solidified the term as referring to a revolutionary movement seeking a classless, stateless society where the means of production are communally owned. Thus, the term communism evolved from general notions of shared living to signify a specific political and economic ideology advocating the abolition of private property and class distinctions. Etymology of the term capitalism. The term capitalism derives from the word capital, which has its roots in the Latin word capit, meaning head. This reflects the historical practice of using head to count wealth, such as livestock or assets. The root capit has been influential across many languages and contexts, often metaphorically extending its meaning beyond the physical head to signify top, chief, or principal. The term influenced words in many Romance languages, such as Italian, capo, head, leader; Spanish, cabeza, head; French, chef, leader, head of a group. It also influenced English, through Old French and directly from Latin, contributing to words like per capita, per person, captain originally meaning chief or head of a group. Capital from capit, referring to the head or main part, such as a city or wealth. Etymological development. Latin root, capit, head, evolved to signify wealth or assets in medieval times, particularly in the context of livestock, a primary form of capital in agrarian societies. Medieval usage. The term capital began to refer to money, property, or goods used for investment or generating profit. Early modern usage. By the 17th century, capital was widely used in economic contexts, denoting funds or wealth invested to generate more wealth. Capitalism as a term. The word capitalism, French, capitalism, began to appear in the 19th century, with early uses attributed to French and English thinkers. It was popularized as a term to describe the economic system characterized by private ownership of the means of production, market-driven economies, and profit motives. Association with economic theory. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, in their critiques of the capitalist system, further solidified the term's modern meaning in works such as Das Kapital, 1867. While they did not coin the term, they gave it prominence in the context of class struggles and economic systems. Thus, capitalism evolved to describe an economic system focused on the accumulation and investment of capital to generate profit, distinguishing it from earlier systems like feudalism. Etymology of the term colonialism. The term colonialism comes from the Latin word colonia, meaning settlement or farm, which in turn derives from colonus, meaning farmer or settler. Colonus itself stems from the verb colere, which has meanings like to cultivate, inhabit, tend, or worship. The verb colere has several derivatives across languages that imply cultivation, care, or settlement, for example culture in English. The Latin root reflects the early Roman concept of settling people on conquered land to assert control, a practice the Romans applied extensively across their empire. The term colonialism began to take on its modern meaning in the 15th and 16th centuries, as European powers like Spain, Portugal, Britain, and France expanded their territories overseas. During this period, colonialism came to mean not just settlement but the broader practice of exerting political, economic, and cultural control over foreign lands and peoples. The term as we understand it today, associated with domination and exploitation of other regions, solidified in the 19th century, as imperialism became closely linked with colonial expansion. The transformation from a term about farming and settlement to one describing a political system reflects how European languages adapted vocabulary to describe new concepts during the Age of Exploration, as European powers began to establish overseas colonies.
That was your daily dose of etymology in 23 minutes. Make sure to like and subscribe with notifications for more. Comment what other etymologies you want me to explore next.